I spoke yesterday with a trusted person who works for one of the largest bullion dealers in Switzerland. They have zero stock of silver, zero, and they haven't been able to get any for many weeks. They do have silver coming in the door from people who are selling it, but the second it comes in the door, it's instantly sold. So everything which is coming in is being sold. They have nothing in stock. In general, and when I say in general, it is about 2 out of 3 times markets that had crashed by 5% were significantly higher a year later. And mostly a week later and a month later. Not always, but generally they were much higher. Of course, there was a 1 in 3 chance that they'd be lower a year later. But when they were higher, on the occasions when they're higher, in general, they were significantly higher, particularly for silver, much less so for gold, which seems to be a much more stable asset. But then there were far less 5% crashes for gold than there were for silver. I think silver had something like 8 or 9 times as many 5% crashes as gold did. So silver is a far more volatile asset. So when it's going down, it goes down further. When it's going up, it goes up further. So as you said, on the occasions when it went up, the 2 out of 3, it was up like 38% after a year after the crash. About silver, has anything changed in the silver market? No, the fundamentals of the silver market haven't changed. Everything is the same as it was before. We still got all these geopolitical concerns. We've still got the supply and demand situation where the consumers, the industries which you need silver for manufacturing, they're not going to make less cars or less solar panels or less electronics because the price is lower or higher. It doesn't make any difference. Either way, it makes no difference. That's not changed. The fact that silver's become a strategic metal last year in America hasn't changed. The fact that China has decided to impose export restrictions from the 1st of January on silver hasn't changed. So absolutely nothing has changed. And I know I tried to go into this particular, the Geneva branch of this particular large bullion dealer about 2 weeks ago, and I'm a regular customer there. I'm regularly buying. They know me very well. But on this occasion, it's the first occasion ever when the man at the door said, "Look, I'm very sorry, sir, but we've got so many people trying to come in the door. We're only doing it by appointment at the moment." So this was a Monday. He said, "You have to make an appointment, and the earliest date we can give you an appointment will be Thursday."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, I'm awfully sorry, that's not going to be convenient for me on Thursday. I'll let you know when I can come." Now, it was a great shame that I didn't insist, because I was planning to buy if they would have had it, which I now know they wouldn't have had it, the latest 2026 coins, the gold and silver coins. I like to get all the different collections which are out there. I like to get the latest year, not the bullion coins, but the collector coins. Things like the Chinese panda, things like the Australian lunar collection, things like the Queen's Beasts of the UK, things like the wild animals of Canada, and then there's the Spanish collection, which I can't remember what they got. They got the horse. There's a couple of others, which I think they're only on the 3rd or 4th of that collection. So I like to get the new year when I can, because with these collections, they're all limited supply. Once they're sold out, they're sold out. But I couldn't get them. I couldn't go in because they wouldn't let me in. And in fact, it would have turned out if I had got in, they wouldn't have had it anyway, from what I'm hearing now.
A major Swiss bullion dealer has zero silver stock and hasn't been able to get any for weeks, with lines of customers outside the door. The recent crash was a stop-loss cascade triggered by the Warshvet announcement. Historically, after such crashes, silver has a 2/3 chance of gaining 38 within a year. The key rule is to only buy 1/3 of your intended position initially, then buy more if fundamentals remain strong.
So I didn't go back, but the shame was, in the intervening period, the gold price rocketed up, and it's still, as of today, and the silver price, they're still higher than the day I went in at the start of January. So we're still in positive territory for silver. Had you been asleep in the month of January, you'd be looking at the price to say, "Oh my God, it's up 9% this year." You wouldn't be saying it crashed yesterday or on Friday. You wouldn't be saying that. You say, "Oh, look at the price. We're only a month's gone by and I'm up 9%." You'd be over the moon. First of all, the market had set itself up for a potential crash at any time, and that could have come earlier or it could have come much later at higher prices. So it's a bit like a forest with lots of dry wood. But you need a spark to ignite it. So what we had was effectively a forest full of dry wood, and the dry wood, as far as silver was concerned, and gold to a large extent too, were what's called stop losses. Now, stop losses are something which can be put in place at the choice of an investor, or are put in place by the exchange, or are put in place by your broker with whom you have a margin arrangement. What a stop loss is it's an arrangement with the exchange that if a certain price is touched, your holding will automatically be sold by the computer without asking you anything. There's no questions asked. Stop loss price is touched. Let's say the stop loss price on silver was $100. If it touches $100 exactly, your trade goes through. It's the next trade. It doesn't guarantee that you get the stop loss price. You might get less. So that's the dry tinder, the stop losses. So when one stop loss gets triggered, it'll drive the price slightly lower, and that might trigger the next stop loss, which goes lower and lower, and each stop loss triggers the next one. So that's like the forest fire. When one twig lights, it lights the next one and the next one, and then it spreads. What's the reason why that happens? Because as a general rule, when a crash is happening, there's a degree of two things going on. One, there's some panic selling. Those who are saying, I got it wrong, I'm out of here before I lose any more money, I don't care how much, I'm just out. And then the second thing is the people who are forced out by the market, because they're on margin, they have no choice, the stop losses are being triggered, and they're selling when they never wanted to sell. If they knew this was going to happen, if they would have had time, they'd have pulled their stop loss and lowered it or done something else. So those two groups of people selling basically mean we've got what's called at the bottom of a crash, you always have what's called an oversold market. More people have sold than really wanted to or intended to. The market has fallen further than it should have done, as justified by everything which is going on. And that's why when you get a recovery, on the 2 out of 3 occasions, it tends to be a much stronger recovery than the fall itself. There's a rule which I use, and it took me 18 years of investing to discover this. So for the first 18 years of my investing life, I discovered that when I would buy something, the price would almost certainly fall the next day. And I also discovered that when I sold something, the price would then immediately go shooting up and carry on up forever, never getting back to the price I sold it at. And it was very frustrating. I had 18 years of that suffering. Now, I've been investing now for half a century. So by the time I got to the 18-year mark, I kind of sat down and said, why is it? It feels like there's some God who knows what I'm doing. It knows when I bought and it's going to screw me over, and it knows when I sold it's going to screw me over. How could this market or the God or whatever it is know what I'm doing and do the opposite? And then I found a solution. I said, I can trick it. I'm only going to buy 1/3 of what I intend. So if my position is going to be 10,000, at the time it was 6,000. I said I said 6,000 at the time. I said I'm only going to buy $1,500 worth. That's it. And then I'll sit on my hands, and the market won't know whether to screw me over by taking the price lower or screw me over by taking it higher. Because either way, it's not screwing me over, because if it takes it lower, I'm a happy bunny, because I've got 66% of my position, which is yet to be bought. And then I said, if it goes higher, I'm also going to be a happy bunny, because that 33% will become 50%. So I don't have to spend the remaining 66. I can buy the remaining 66 for only 50, leaving me 16% free to buy something else. And by doing that, it does two things. One, it ensures that you're never buying at the top of the market, because you've got a range of prices at purchases at different prices. And the second thing it does, it helps you understand your psychology of what you've done and why you've done it, and also helps you understand if you've made a mistake. So it took quite a lot, many more years to discover this second rule, which I'll now tell you. If you've bought something and you've given it a reasonable length of time to mature, let's say a year, but you could use a shorter period or a longer period if you like, and the price hasn't gone the direction you expected, in other words, it's down, you have to study that item and discover why it's down. Why did I make a mistake? I must have made a mistake. The whole world disagrees with me. It's gone down. So I must have done something wrong. What did I do wrong? So you study it and you try and find that mistake. And when you find that mistake, that's usually the reason why you should be selling your loser, not increasing the position. But if you don't find the mistake, let's say I discover that the price is down because the founder of the company has died and the family of the founder has been forced to sell shares to pay the death duties. Now, that's driving the price down for reasons which have got absolutely nothing to do with the fundamentals. In that case, the fundamentals are still intact. And therefore, what should I be doing? I should be increasing my position at that lower price. But most of the time, I'll find that the reason the price has gone down is because the fundamentals have deteriorated. So that's my justification for selling. We've got a situation which may come up in March where we can see that the number of open contracts on COMEX is considerably, is many multiples, in fact, higher than the eligible, than the registered silver. The registered silver is what can be delivered. It's also higher than the combination of eligible and registered combined. Eligible is what's not, which is the right shape and size in the right place, but hasn't yet been allocated for delivery. But so all the COMEX silver in storage is not sufficient to meet all the contracts which are outstanding. And the number of contracts which are outstanding have been rising for the March delivery. And that's just 1 month, okay? It's not talking about February or April and so forth, but March is the big one. March is really, really big, which is why I'm talking about March. Now, it could well happen, and probably will happen, that before we get to March, many of those people who are long or short will close, each side will close their positions, and then there will be no problem in the delivery of the silver. However, I have observed that every month of 2025, the amount of silver being called for delivery was many multiples of what was called for delivery the year before, 2024. And in January 26, the amount of silver called for delivery in maturing COMEX contracts was double the year, sorry, not double, I think three and a half times what it was the year before, 2025, which was 2.5 times the year before that. So we're talking about 7 times as much silver was called for delivery. The person who bought the futures actually want it, as opposed to rolling their contracts forward, as 2 years ago, as 2024. So we're seeing a large increase in calls for delivery. And that means that when we get to March, it may well be that a large percentage of those futures contracts, instead of being rolled over or closed out, are actually called for delivery. We don't know, because we don't know who's behind it. Anyone could be behind it. Could be multiple parties or one major party. I think it's multiple parties. But if they're all calling for delivery, the silver just isn't there. All these mining companies, the last reported profits we have are the profits to the 30th of September 2025. And that encompassed a period from June to September, when the silver price and the gold price was considerably lower than we saw in the last quarter of 2025. So the quarter which hasn't been reported, September to December, generally saw much higher prices, much higher than the quarter which has been reported of June to September. And if the present prices of gold and silver hold, the precious metal prices in the first quarter of 2026 will be higher, much higher, than the average prices in the last quarter of 2025. Now, we don't know whether the silver prices will go up or down or hold, but you can't do anything other than assume that they'll stay where they are until the end of the quarter, which won't be the case. But if they hold, we're going to have 2 consecutive quarters, the December quarter and the March quarter, at least, where the average selling price of these mining companies' precious metals will have been much higher than it was in the previously reported quarter. And when analysts upgrade the target price of a stock, all the algorithms from the computers and investment managers and even human beings like you and I look at this and say, oh, this company's did have a target price $1 above where we are now. It's $20 above where they are. That's attractive. So what do? We buy the companies, and so do the machines, by the way. They buy the companies with the highest target price relative to where the share price is. So I'm expecting that we will have much higher results in the coming quarters, all the way through to if price holds to the end of 2026, and hopefully the price will go higher, so it'll be a continuation of the same. And I expect those higher reports or profits to result in higher forecasts for the share price going forward from the analysts, which would normally result in a jump in the share price on the day the results are announced, because you can imagine what the analysts do when they hear this good news. They talk to their best clients, and they'll ring up the best client who they know is interested in the talk and say, I just listened to the results. They're doing really great. They're going to make a lot more profit.